Three, two, one. Ba 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 ba. I don't know, guys. Today's gonna be a chill stream. Today's gonna be a chill stream. You did it! You did it, that guy. You did it. What did you do? You did a thing? You did it. I have had a relaxing day today. I've literally just been sleeping. Finally, I've been thinking about the last 3 months, and it feels like there's always just been something, There's always just been something, and now it's the first time where just no, there's nothing. Finally nothing. I got to just sit out on the grass, look at the sky, hang out with my little pug. Good to see you, Matthew. Good to see you. And it's just making me realize, one of the thoughts I've been thinking today, and I've said it a lot, I think, but it's worth restating, it would be amazingly easy to make a calmer, more relaxing environment for everyone. It would be so easy to do. We could do it so shortly. It would take almost no time whatsoever. That we have this major impediment, this major deficiency in our society, which is the idea that there's a small group of rapacious psychopaths who need to be paid attention to at all. That we need to do anything for these people, and that they deserve any amount of our attention or time. And if we simply got rid of these total losers, these just demented, unhinged losers from our society, and said, okay, what's the work that actually does need to get done? The whole financial sector is a fraud. Right? People make hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, and all they're doing is shuffling around numbers on screens, doing nothing important whatsoever. And if we just, eliminated all of this nonsense, that's obviously fraudulent and achieves nothing of value for anyone, and focused on, the things that are actually jobs, and started to have genuine conversations about what does some of this stuff matter. There's a really great book, somebody brought it up yesterday, David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs, where he's an economist, and he figured that something like 30% of the jobs that exist in the economy are just total nonsense. Oh well, the Canadian Stalin. Oh well, high praise. It'd be amazing if I was Stalin. Stalin was actually a very, very cool guy. Very cool. Did some actually, really, really amazing stuff. And if it came to pass in my life, somehow, through whatever miracle, that I ascended to the degree that Stalin had achieved, I would be baffled by it. I would be absolutely blown away. Yeah. Shay Luan, I don't know if I've ever seen you here, Shay, but that's a strong first comment. Yeah, just saw that comment on TikTok. Gonna say that's high praise. Yeah, high praise, man. High praise. Stalin wasn't perfect, obviously. Mr. Moon, good to see you, bud. Stalin wasn't perfect, obviously, but but I think that he was a strong leader and had a strong belief in the ideals of Marxism, and a strong belief in the idea of lifting people out of poverty and lifting people into a better quality of life. And he was a strong leader that led people through the Nazi invasion. I think some of the criticism that comes from the Trotskyists is probably true, that I think that avoiding the war entirely would have been a better success, but when you're dealing with capitalist forces like the Nazis, when you're dealing with capitalist forces like Adolf Hitler, You know, it's a tough game to play once capitalism unleashes its most grotesque figures, which it always will. Grinning, good to see you. Jobs are for losers, sorry to say. We've all been forced to be losers. There's no shame in it. But jobs are a terrible deal, yeah? That's why I always found it funny when politicians stand up and what do they always say? We're going to bring in more jobs. We're going to force those capitalists to buy more serfs. That's our solution. And all the serfs go, yay, more jobs for these worthless, pathetic parasites who provide no value for the society. Yay! Adam says, I heard that Stalin moved some ethnic group against their will, meeting the definition of cultural genocide or at least ethnic cleansing. Source, please. Source, please, Adam. I'll take a source. Like, and these sorts of claims that get levied against Stalin, it would be very easy to find a source, right? Like, it's been like 80 years, right? Like, it's been a long time. And there are professors at Oxford and Harvard that would love to write big, long theses and dissertations laden with all of the evidence and proof you would need in order to show very clearly that Stalin had done exactly that. And I've never seen it. So anytime I hear this kind of stuff, I'm just like, source, please. And you know what people do? They do a Google search and they find the CIA director saying some dumb shit. Like, that's what happens. So I'm to the point now where if you want to disparage Mao or Stalin or Lenin or these people, source, please. I'm not going to accept anything else. And I'm not going to have a conversation about it anymore. Like, I'm tired of people trying to convince me that nonsense is real when their source is literally the CIA. And then most of the time, the people... Like, we had a guy in here just the other day. His name was Jonas. Right? He was trying to convince me on this kind of nonsense stuff. And then finally, we got into a conversation about JFK, of all things. Somehow the conversation ended up there. And he said, yeah, I think the CIA killed JFK. And I just said to him straight. And it just ended the conversation we were having in regards to communism being bad and all that. I just said to him, so you think the CIA can assassinate a president of the United States and get away with it, but you think they're totally telling you the truth about everything you've ever heard about the reason why they exist, right? Like, the CIA was started to destroy the Soviet Union and to staunch the spread of communism. But yeah, they're 100% telling you the truth about it, right? Like, I'm so over this. Like, I'm over this. I'm over taking this seriously. I love this. Guy's got a wikipedia.org/gulag. Oh yes, oh no. The Soviets had a prison. Oh, guys, you'll never believe it. The Soviets had prisons. Oh, this coming from a country that currently has, 25% of the world's prison population? Like, don't bring up this gulag shit. It's embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing. You live in a country where cops randomly pick up black people and throw them in jail cells, and you're like, gulags, though. Shut up. It's so embarrassing. Mr. Moon, wanted to ask you, John, about some good reading on theology and spirituality. I've enjoyed your discussions on the topics. I'm looking for some intelligent theology. You want to go to, like, for real, Thomas Aquinas, John Milton, Augustus, like the writers, like Isaac Newton. Like, these are the guys. It's not easy reading because they're speaking a different language. That's the truth. And I don't mean they're speaking Latin. I mean that they are building a code of ethics and a foundation of thought on using the figure of Christ as sort of their backing. And one of the things that I've managed to do, I feel, is take a lot of their ideas and a lot of what they said and thought and reinterpret it. Or not reinterpret it, translate it. That a lot of their ideas are easy to translate into sort of the secular language that we use today. Like, they are not speaking in a secular language. They are speaking in a language of theism and Christianity and Christ. And it's strong stuff. It's good stuff, but it's like they're speaking in a code, right? And you gotta, and it's not that they're trying to speak in a code. It's just that there was no language before, so they're just kind of making it up and trying to find a way to express something that's difficult to express. Like, it's not easy to express this stuff, right? Like the concepts of like God and concepts of theism, right? They're easy to misunderstand, and if you want to misunderstand them, you can very easily. And you can just see the New Atheist movement to see how easy it is to misunderstand the subject, right? Shay says, Michael Parenti also had their fair criticism on Stalin, but he greatly defended Stalin's USSR. It's not perfect, but the West villainized him to no end. Yeah, I mean, Stalin's a man. Every single leader, in any moment, anywhere, at any time, it has something that you can criticize. These people are not gods, right? These people are not gods. They're just people. Like, they're just people. That's the crazy part about it. The idea that the Soviets even managed to do what they did and achieve what they did is astounding. Been planning on giving Aquinas a go. It's intimidating. Yeah, it certainly is. Like, it certainly is. It's an incredibly intimidating. Honestly, Mr. Moon, man, like, give the Bible a run up. Straight up, open up the Bible. Like, forget about, like, any of this modern theology or any of this kind of stuff, right? Just straight up crack the Bible open and give that a read. And, like, understand that I think one of the most, do I use the word despicable? Like, sure. One of the most despicable things that I think has happened in the modern discourse surrounding theology is this idea that when we're talking about God, we're talking about a guy that lives in the clouds, right? Like, or the giant spaghetti monster. Like, it's embarrassing. Like, it's embarrassing that that's where the discourse is, but that is where the discourse is, and it sort of eliminates the ability to have an intelligent conversation about the subject. If you've got to try to convince somebody that, like, okay, no, like, literally nobody is saying that. So the whole conversation has turned into just a giant straw man, near as I can tell, right? And the response from most people, right, most rational people in the society has been, oh, this straw man is obviously true, and so I'm not going to put up with that, and I'm just going to get rid of that idea. And, you know, it's somewhat reasonable, because this straw man has become the core of the discourse. And modern theologians are not really good at explaining that. Like, modern theologians talk as though it's well understood what it is that they're talking about, and it's not well understood, right? That when we're talking about God, we're talking about the underpinning of all creation, right? We're not talking about a man in the clouds. It's like not what's being discussed. And I don't think I've ever seen an atheist that's actually attempted to grapple with the subject in a serious manner, because I think it's just easier to misunderstand the subject and strawman it, especially when there's so much heresy and so much ridiculous bullshit in the conversation. Like, the evangelical right, it's easy to lampoon these guys, right? Because they're illiterate boobs, mainly con men and grifters, right? So it's easy to take them and say, okay, this whole theology thing is just into the waste bin of history, right? But, like, the people who were responsible for the Enlightenment, for example, they were theists, right? Isaac Newton was a theist, so I think it's worthwhile to find spirituality without deism too. We can make a place, but we don't need an almighty. I mean, I at this stage in the game, I just think, like, part of the issue that I see going on in the society today is that we're so spiritually dead as a people. Like we've eliminated the concept of a collective spirit from our consciousness. Like we are spiritually dead people, and we basically seek to exploit one another as objects. We commodify one another. We understand how to judge one another through this commodification. And because the culture is spiritually dead, anybody who comes in with any kind of statement at all that kind of flickers into that spiritual conversation gains a lot of traction very quickly. And unfortunately, the unfortunate truth is that means that you end up with a lot of grifters, a la Jordan Peterson, right? Just a total grifter. Or you end up with well-meaning lunatics. And I think there's a couple of those guys floating around. People who I think are well-meaning guys and who probably believe what they say and believe what they think, but are just kind of lunatics. And and anybody, and so what this means, of course, is that to anybody who has any amount of skepticism inside of their heart and any kind of skepticism inside of their worldview, it means that anybody who starts talking a game about any kind of spirituality whatsoever is immediately regarded as a grifter or a lunatic, for good reason, because those are the people who have taken over the discourse. And it makes it so that it's not actually possible to have a real conversation about the nature of human existence, about the idea of a collective consciousness, which is an idea that the CIA itself verified in the 1960s and 70s. Funnily enough, there's great papers on this. Anemone, good to see you. And the yeah, that guy says the flying spaghetti monster isn't a straw man. It's a particular parody of Yahweh. It's meant to criticize formal organized religion and its baseless assertions about supernatural. Right, but it is a straw man because the flying spaghetti monster is a being that lives within the confines of the universe, right? That bestows goodness and all that kind of stuff, right? Which is not what is being discussed at all. So it's not even really a parody. It's like a parody of a parody of a parody. Like the concept of God that like all Christian theists have said from the outset. Like one of my favorite was it's not Dante. It's is it Dante? Doesn't matter. There's an ancient Greek philosopher who said nature itself reveals God. That the concept of God is that the collection of all things is God. That the underpinning of creation is God. And that we can have a serious conversation about this subject. But the flying spaghetti monster is like kind of an admission that we're not interested in having a serious conversation. It's just kind of an admission of just like a shrugging whatever, move on with your life. And if that's what you want to do, then fine. Like, that's fine. Anyway, theism. People ask me, like, what's the point even? Of discussing theological sort of discussions? And I think that it does change the way you look at the world around you, right? It changes the way you look at the world around you. That if you start to perceive what is going on around you, and as individual people, not as individuals, but part of a collective energy that we are all part of together, you begin to treat people differently. Because we live in a society that atomizes, that individualizes, that's the nature of capital, right? That capital basically says you are an object to be exploited and nothing more. right? Your desires and your wants, and like facts don't care about your feelings, all those sorts of things, right? Your emotions are a you problem, all of that. And when it begins to deal with spirituality, it's very much in this sort of mindfulness cult sort of way, where everything is individualized, right? That your spirituality is an individual pursuit for yourself to achieve your own personal goals, right? Yet that you're supposed to seek meditation not in order to connect to any kind of larger life force or larger idea or larger concept, but that you're supposed to do it so that you can really focus on grind set, bro. Sorry guys, 1 second. Milo, buddy, you're just standing there whining for no reason. Come on, dude. Nah, you've had lots of peanut butter, you've had lots of toys, you've had lots of treats, you've had lots of stuff. You're a good boy. Come on, come chill out, okay? John, is my concept of God deistic or even pantheistic? I don't know that I even care about any of that. Look, my idea of God and my concept of God is very, very straightforward and simple. That everything we are experiencing is a singular energy. That we here in the universe and all of this, we have an illusionary sense of separation, right? We like to categorize things, but really when you start going down into the energy of it, into the quantum energy of all things, it's a singular energy. And the only question that I'm asking, like I think that we've done ourselves an enormous disservice as a people by asking the question, does God exist? Right? Because that's allowed the giant spaghetti monster into the conversation, which I consider to be the biggest straw man ever created. The question is not, does God exist? The question is the universe alive? That's the question. That we have, we can all agree that the universe exists and that we are part of it and that we are part of this natural construct and this natural system. But we never actually pause to actually think, is this system itself a life form? Is this system itself sentient or conscious? And I feel like that's a better question to ask because it cuts to the chase. Asking the question, does God exist? It just falls. It gets everybody to fall into this really bad set of definitions, right? Like the giant spaghetti monster, for example, right? That you don't get to actually deal. Like you have to take all your time to even get to the nugget of what the conversation is actually about, which is that we all live in a singular energy, and that singular energy has a consciousness of itself. And so I prefer to cut to the chase and get to the question, is the universe alive? Does the universe itself have a consciousness? And when you dwell upon that concept, Milo, you're killing me, dude. When you dwell upon that, you've got to come to the conclusion that it has to have a consciousness. It has to have a consciousness, because if you consider yourself to be conscious and part of the universe, well, then the universe is at least as conscious as you are. The universe is at least as aware as you are. And it doesn't take a big leap to get into... it doesn't get a big leap into thinking that, okay, well, if it's as conscious as I am, then it's got to be as conscious as me and this person. And then that person and all of that. And so a conscious and living universe is right in front of our eyes. That people ask, well, what's the evidence for this concept? And it's like, would you accept the evidence if it waved in front of your face? But the conversations that we're having these days, like you flip by on TikTok and you do all this kind of stuff, right? And you're just loaded with... it's just loaded with these like Christian fascists, basically, just saying that Jesus is God. And it's wild that we're not having like a more serious conversation about the nature of reality and the nature of what we're in, and we're doing everything we can to ignore it. It's pretty wild to me. Yeah, North America is interesting because of the mix of religion and hyper-individualism. Well, yeah, that's why I say, like, capitalism is a death cult, right? Capitalism is a death cult. That it is, the worship of the individual is part of the decline. The worship of money, the worship of the individual, and the worship of ignorance. Like, we're very proud of how ignorant we are. We're very proud of how selfish we are. And we're very proud of how much money we have. And this this religious mix, this sort of, because I'm a strong believer that humanity just creates religion, right? Like, we create it. You can't ever really be rid of it. That if you think that you are rid of it, chances are good that you've erected some kind of religious belief system. Everybody has a god, right? Everybody has a god. Like, there is something that you hold up to be the highest concept or the highest ideal. Something that you worship, something that you idolize, something that you hold above all other things, whether it's an object or a concept. And everybody does this. And the danger, of course, in Western civilization is that we don't believe we do this. That we think that we are free from that idea, right? And typically, if you think that you are immune to something, or if you think you're not fallen for something, like, the people who are the most heavily propagandized are the people who believe they are not. That's the hard truth. And I think it's true too of this religious idea, that the people who think that they are non-religious are usually the most firmly religious people. That it's just that their God is something else. They've chosen a God somewhere else and they don't acknowledge it, right? And so they're in that thrall without realizing it. Most of the time, that's what I find happens. Content says, nah, the question is, will we be supernaturally punished for living wrong, and by whose standards of those supernatural laws? Yeah, that's such a dumb, like, that's so human. Like, I feel like the whole humans are going to be punished by God thing is literally just temples trying to turn monkeys into people who are not, like, just beating the shit out of one another. That's all. Just trying to terrify people straight. I think that's basically where all that comes from. That we're talking monkeys, like, we've been monkeys all along. We're not better than monkeys. And, you know, you think, you look at a tribe of monkeys and how a tribe of monkeys act, and you're like, oh man, how do we make it so that these monkeys stop acting this way? You know? And one of the ways that, and it's effective, it works, is that you scare them. You scare them with threats of hellfire and all of this, and you erect a series of laws, and you say, these laws were sent to us by God, and if you don't abide by these laws, then God's going to send you to hell forever. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's sort of incoherent, but, you know, desperate times is more or less how I look at it. Content, basically, we're allowed to have butt sex, but everything else is cope. Mr. Moon says, what a beautiful thought, that the universe is at least as conscious as I am. Nice antidote to narcissism. Well, I mean, and if you follow this thread, it does mean that if you follow this thread, it does mean that, like, you are speaking with the voice of God. You are a created force in the universe, right? You were created by the universe, and you are here speaking intelligently so that other beings can understand you, which is itself a miraculous act. It's absolutely miraculous that we can speak to one another and be understood, and we can create abstract meaning and enter an abstract space with just the voices that we make with our mouth. That's an astounding fact of our reality. That I can speak and be understood, and you can understand and then speak back, and that we can alter each other in an abstract space. That's incredible. And because we are both created beings, created by the universe, it means that we have this equality of validity, that our lives are both equally valid. We're both equal in the eyes of our Creator, or of the creation of the universe. The concepts like success don't really make any sense, right? Like what's success? Like, what does that even look like? Like, the rules of life are that everyone is randomly generated. You have a series of experiences, and then everybody dies. Those are the rules. Like, and there's no and this idea that the forces of the universe, or the forces of creation, are going to be like, oh well, you were LeBron James, whereas you were some guy that lived on the street, and so LeBron James is clearly better, so he'll become the right-hand man to Jesus. Like, it's so dumb, the more you think about it, that what we're all experiencing all together is simply the universe attempting to understand itself. Is simply the universe attempting to understand itself. And that we have been granted this gift to be able to communicate those ideas to one another, and we basically don't use it. Like, we basically don't use it, which is astounding to me. We have this enormous superpower, this enormous ability to create collective understanding and to raise collective consciousness and to speak to one another. Like, I speak to you with the voice of God, and you speak to me with the voice of God. And everybody is, in fact, an aspect of God. And we are all talking to one another to find a collective understanding of what the hell is this? Why are we here? How is it that this happened in the first place? What is this world that we live in? And more or less, the system of capital that we live under does everything it can to prevent these discussions from happening. And we're supposed to simply just grind set down, work hard to get the big house so that you have a big tombstone before you die, I guess. Like, we're easy to distract. It's easy to distract us and to get us off track of these conversations. And for good reason. Like, we have concerns. Like, we need to eat. There's food and shelter that's withheld from us. And so to me, I think, because of the decline of these conversations, because of a decline in the understanding of what it is we are actually doing here, it's opened up a vacuum to allow a worship of capital itself, like the worship of money and self and ignorance. But that's not really recognized as a religion. It's not really recognized as, even though I think it is completely. I think it's actually the most powerful religion that exists today, is the worship of money, the worship of the self, and the worship of ignorance, which is the capitalist death cult. And we just pretend as though it doesn't exist, even though it obviously exists. And what it is a pathetic attempt to replace a worship of reality itself, a worship of the world. To put it in the most theological terms ever, a worship of the one true God. And we just don't do it. Shay says, what did Marx say already? The sign of the oppressed creature, heart of a heartless world, illusionary happiness, and all that. Yeah. Loco Monkey, good to see you, bud. That's a fun name. Loco Monkey. How you guys all doing on TikTok? Yeah, free thinking is dangerous. Yeah, nobody wants a free thinker, right? You're free to call yourself a free thinker, but you better believe everything the CIA has to say. Content says, honestly, if you want me to admit that there may be spiritual deserts where the sanctity of humanity is lost, yep, it's seen in something like banning universal nutrition for school children as the GOP. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Yep. Apparently they've campaigned on preventing universal breakfast and lunch in schools. Yeah, that's spiritually dead in my view, for sure. Like, the true path to an enlightened world or a spiritual world is to provide the base necessities for life, Food and shelter are not, Cal, good to see you, bud. Food and shelter are not choices. You don't get to choose that one, right? You need to eat. You need to have shelter, right? Like these are necessities. These are necessities, and these necessities are withheld, and they're withheld for a good reason, right? There's good reason to withhold food and shelter from the public. If the public had access to food and shelter, then they might actually live reasonable lives and not need to sell themselves to this death cult. They might actually say, like, what's the point of working for these worthless capitalists? All they do is cause pain and suffering wherever they go. Why are we attaching ourselves to these literal psychopaths? And of course, all the system can actually say in response to this is, oh, you're lazy. Oh, you just want to sit around. Oh, you're the one that wants to exploit the work of others, right? That basically they're just saying you have to justify yourself to the machine, as opposed to the machine justifying itself to you. And they do this because they know the system of capital no longer has any credibility. They understand that the system of capital has no credibility left at all. That we could very easily, and I keep saying very easily because I actually do think that it would be extremely easy. Like, in terms of the actual mechanism of doing it, in terms of the actual, setting up of the system, I think it would actually be astoundingly easy. That the difficulty would be in dealing with the capitalists. That would be where the difficulty would come. It wouldn't be in the actual setting up of the system. It would be in dealing with the psychopaths who have taken over the system. You got a lot of energy for no reason. You're a good boy. You're a good boy. So, I did find some interesting headlines today. Right? I have not seen 1 cent. Billions stolen in wage theft from U.S. workers. This is kind of more or less what I'm talking about, right? Like, the number one form of theft in North America is wage theft, and it's not close. Like, it isn't like $1 billion lost from wage theft and 900 million from petty theft or something, right? Like, it's an astoundingly, shockingly high number that is well ahead of everybody, of every other form of theft, and yet the punishment for it is so pathetic, right? Like, I've said this all the time when it comes to wage theft, that it is in the capitalists' interests entirely to commit to wage theft, to commit wage theft against their employees. If I was a capitalist owner in this society, I would always try to steal wages 100% of the time. I don't think that I think that they are incentivized to do it, because the punishment for being charged and being found guilty for wage theft is paying the wage, and that's it. There's no jail time, there's no extra fine, there's no nothing, right? So the capitalist who is committed to the path of wage theft has every reason to do it, because even if it only works maybe 30% of the time, well, you're 30% richer, aren't you? Right? And then all of the hardship that the worker has to go through, right, getting you to court, doing all this kind of stuff, well, that's their problem, right? That's their problem. Yet the international students you teach are constant victims of wage theft, of course, right? Like, international students are perfect marks, right? They're the perfect mark. Like, they don't know anything about the system that they live in. They don't speak the language, right? It's difficult for people to take them seriously, and when you steal from them, right? And most of them, I think, feel as though they're not building roots. They're transitory in the first place. and and so stealing from them, like, chances are good they're not going to stick around. Like, I lived in an apartment complex that that explicitly did this, that they would take advantage of the fact that these international people were only there for a short period of time, and so they didn't need to fix up the place, or they didn't need to abide by tenant laws or anything like this, because they knew these people were going to be gone soon. And the people who were there weren't going to put up a fuss because they knew they were going to be gone soon. So it's totally fine to steal from these people. And that's how the system's designed. It's designed to reward this sort of behavior. Oh, Milo. Oh, Milo. I'm fine to play with you, dude. Sorry, guys. My dog's getting kind of barky. The dog's getting kind of barky. Isn't he a good little boy? Isn't he a good little boy? See him here on TikTok. Have I seen... Okay. You did it. You did it. You good? You good? You good, my man? You're losing your little mind? You're losing your little mind? Yeah, you are losing your little mind, aren't you? Yeah, you are losing your little mind, because I'm talking to nobody. Who am I talking to? Sorry about that, guys. Yep, capitalists make the laws to break the laws. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, and they're very astute at knowing how to obfuscate and knowing how to make the system, like, I've been thinking recently about these poor libertarian types, right? These it's more or less just college kids, right, who have fallen for this libertarian hogwash, and who have fallen for this, like, trap that is pretty well laid by the capitalists in order to obfuscate what's actually going on, right? That the problem is the government. That the problem is the government. And you never ask the question, well, who owns the government? How is the government set up? What are its incentives? Who does it reward? How does it reward? None of that is ever asked, because the problem is the government. Oh, the government came in. And, well, the government came in on behalf of who, right? These questions are never asked. And I feel like this wage theft one is just another one of these, that the justification is like, oh, well, you take them to court, then they pay the wage, right? Like, yeah, there you go, that should be good enough. It's like, no, it isn't. Like, at this stage in my life, I'm at a point where if people are going to do these sorts of things and they don't go to jail, then there's no justice. There's no justice. Like, if somebody commits an act of like, if you steal groceries from a grocery store, they'll send you to jail for that, right? But if you steal $1 billion in wages from your employees, oh, that's fine, right? Oh, you just got to pay that back. Oh, I'll just file bankruptcy. Oh, okay. Bye-bye. Don't need to worry about it, right? That's how our system works. Because we're no longer interested in being a credible nation. My friend fell down the libertarian hole. The more I talk to them, the more they kind of have a point. No, if your ideology can be dismantled by playing a single board game one time, which is Monopoly, then you probably are not accurate. Every single time I've talked to a libertarian, I feel like I'm talking to a fundamentalist Christian who's just made the decision that magic is real, who don't want to acknowledge what facts are, right? And most libertarians do have this kind of hyper-individualist streak. And an anti-capitalist libertarian. This is kind of what I'm talking about with libertarianism as well. That, like, I don't think the libertarians even know what they mean anymore. That the word is just steadily losing all of its, like, near as I can tell, libertarianism is steadily just becoming me good. That's basically it. That as long as it's good for me, then it's fine. Like, that's more or less what I'm seeing. Right? That's more or less what I'm seeing. Yeah, justice is how much money you have. Yep, exactly. So, we've got a headline here. Pakistan pays for its first shipment of Russian oil in Chinese currency. So it begins that the American dollar is going to decline. The American dollar is going to go into a decline. And this is the reason why. Because the entire rest of the world is no longer willing to trade goods and services in the world economy on the dollar. And when you get major countries not trading oil on the dollar, it's a big, big problem. Milo, man, you gotta calm down, okay? You gotta calm down, my man. I know this is what happens when you get like this. This is what happens. You get to go to hug jail. Hug jail, hug jail. Hug my pug, hugging jail. Hug jail, hug jail. You're a good, good dog. Yes, you are, Milo. You're a good, good dog. And everybody gets to see you. Hello from North Korea. I'd be very surprised if that were the case, bud. Corey says, I don't see anything good about America losing hegemony. Oh, well, I completely disagree with that idea. America has been an imperial power for far too long, if you ask me. It's been spreading. No, I don't think that that's the case, Corey. Like, it's the same amount of imperialism. Like, there's not much by way of evidence to show that the Chinese are interested in creating an empire. It's just they're Chinese imperialism. Like, if that's the case, I'd like to see the evidence for it, right? Like, I'd like to see the evidence for this Chinese imperialism that you're talking about. Yeah, read Lenin. I agree. You should read Lenin. Like, you should. The argument that, oh, I know, Milo. Oh, I know. But the argument that China is somehow an imperialist nation, like, for what? For doing what? Making trade deals? For creating infrastructure? For building roads? For building highways? I know. Like, what is the... Hey, Yetis, how you doing, bud? What are my thoughts on the Trump indictment? It's good theater. It's real good theater. Like, looks to me like they're basically just indicting Trump for something that they all do, because they're looking for a way to get him out of the conversation. Like, that's kind of what they're looking for. That the system has at least acknowledged that we can't have Trump. Like, we can't have Trump. Trump discredits us. That the existence of Donald Trump within the power structure, it's too on the nose. It's too revelatory. It's too much. That we can't actually that the rest of the world has seen through America, and it sees through America because of a figure like Donald Trump. That the system of American power no longer has any credibility. And so the power structure is doing everything it can to get Trump out of the conversation. I don't think it's going to work. Like, I don't think it's going to work. If anything, it's going to just fuel him, and it's just going to make it bigger. Because the whole system is still responsive in some way. Milo, there's nothing there, my man. There's nothing there, my man. This is steadily turning into the Milo show, this one. Milo has just decided that this show is going to be about him, right? Yeah, the United States and Canada would have lost World War II if the Soviets weren't fighting. Absolutely. Well, more specifically, I think, if you wanted to be more specific with that, Alan, that the United States and Canada would have just aligned with Hitler. That's what would have happened. That Hitler would have defeated the Soviets, and America would have just negotiated with Hitler. That's more or less what would have happened. Like, the reason why the Americans get involved in the war at all is because the Germans start losing on the Eastern Front. Right? You'll notice that they don't actually get involved in the war directly until Stalin starts winning. And then when Stalin starts winning, that's when they invade. And so my opinion of it is that they invade specifically so that Stalin can't take over all of Europe. Okay, Milo, there's literally nothing here for you, my man. This is garbage. You are dead convinced that there is something here for you, and there is nothing here for you. That is garbage. You are losing your mind for garbage. So you're like an average American. Oh, look, it's garbage. I'm going to make a big fuss for garbage. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So how fucked is Canada exactly? Proper, I'm assuming. I think the rest of the world sees identically the United States in terms of foreign and economic policy. Canada is actually in a lot of trouble. The OECD has said that Canada is going to be the least developed economy over the next 3 decades. That we're already in a recession, and that recession's not going to let up. And given the policies that we're following, right? Given the ideas that we're following. So not only are we going to be in a decline, we are going to be the most declined. We're going to decline the most. Yeah, having influence isn't imperialism, right? Like, I would argue that doing imperialism is imperialism, right? Building military bases, invading countries, like that's imperialism. I'm going to become a future Malbuck millionaire. What do you think of the kid who saw aliens in his backyard? Sure he did. Sure. Like, this whole aliens thing is just like anything to get us talking about anything else. Anything to get us talking about anything other than the fact that we are owned by capitalists. Like, anything, right? Like, and they will use anything. Like, that's what this whole AI thing is about. That's what aliens is about. Like, anything that they can find to distract us. If they can use Johnny Depp's trial, like they will, like, anything they can get us to talk about other than, hey, isn't it weird that we have owners? Isn't it weird that there's a labor market that we have to sell ourselves into, and we sell ourselves to psychopaths who rape children on Jeffrey Epstein's island? Isn't that weird? Like, isn't it strange that we do that? Like, and I consider these alien stories to be exactly that. That like 30 years ago, that kind of story would have been like, who cares? Like, that's the kind of thing that you'd get in like the National Enquirer, and nobody would give a shit, right? But now it's like, well, kid sees alien in his yard. This is front page news, because they're desperate. Like, the capitalist class is getting desperate. They're running out of ways to cover for their shittiness. They're running out of ways to distract us. They're running out of tarmac. They're running out of room, right? And like, what's starting to happen, like the big shift that's actually going to happen, right, is that the millennials are getting to be middle-aged. I'm what's known as an elder millennial, right? Like, and so I'm the tip of the spear. The next decade is going to be loaded with millennials coming to my age and realizing that this whole thing is a fraud and a sham. That millennials are going to reach the age of 40. They're going to look around them and they're going to wake up and recognize, oh, this whole thing is a fraud. A total and utter grift from the ground up. There isn't a single credible institution that exists. And they're going to turn to Gen Z, to the kids who are coming up, and they are going to say, we gotta do something about this. We gotta do something about this. And also on top of all of that, the demented boomers, who are the ones keeping this ridiculous sham afloat, are dying. And so the whole thing is coming apart at the seams. The grift is up, the sham is up, and the capitalist class is doing literally everything it can to keep us in a distractionary state so that we never actually sit down and say, why do we care about these psychopathic billionaires? Why do we give a shit about their obvious, overt surrogates? Why do we care about the electoral system, the legal system, the police? Wait, how are these things different than just monarchical kings? These institutions have no credibility. We should just overthrow them and treat them as if they are dead artifacts, because that's exactly what they are. We should abandon them back, because that's what they're doing to us. They're just extracting all our wealth away from us, shipping it off overseas somewhere, more likely into the pockets of Raytheon executives, so that they can murder little children in some place. And we're all supposed to salute this. Fuck all this nonsense. That the federal government has no credibility. The Federal Reserve has no credibility. The Bank of America has no credibility. The only reason we need to treat these institutions as if they have any credibility whatsoever is because they're willing to kick in your doors and send cops to beat you up. That's literally the only thing that they have left, which is why they're funding it. Which is why they're increasing their police forces and increasing their police budgets, because they know they're going to have to use police to beat the shit out of everybody soon. They know that's what's coming, because they understand that they've lost credibility, and they're not interested in regaining credibility. That at this stage in the game, all they're doing is trying to throw up smoke screens like aliens and dumb shit, until finally they've just got to shrug and be like, okay guys, look, this is how it is. We're in charge. Do what we say or we'll shoot you. Which is exactly what they have done in the past. Like when they're shooting Martin Luther King, you think the black population is like, well, this is a free market system, market ideas. You think when they murder Fred Hampton, you think when they're shooting Malcolm X in the streets, that those populations are thinking, man, what a democratic society we live in. We're such a free people. Like, the empire is just expanding its scope to include everybody now. And the black population that's been experiencing this the entire time is looking at us going, welcome to the party. Welcome aboard. We've been talking about this for decades. And it is coming. There is a moment that is coming where the ruling class will finally just say out loud in front of everyone, look, we're obviously in charge. We have all the money. We have all the guns. We've hired enormous amounts of police in order to destroy you if you rebel against us. Get on side, or we're going to kill you. Like, it's coming. The President of the United States will say this in a speech in our lifetime. It's coming. And you already see people like Ben Shapiro basically talking this way. You already see these frauds that exist in the world. And so all they're doing is they're trying to throw up a defensive mechanism so that they don't have to do that. Because they would rather live in a world where everybody thought that they were good, right? They'd rather live in this sort of illusionary space of delusion where it's like, no, I'm a good guy, right? Bill Gates wants everybody to think that he's a good guy, right? Even though he's a child rapist and an obvious narcissistic psychopath, right? Like, but he wants everybody to think that he wears the sweaters and he talks real nice. And I give money to charity. I certainly am not trying to kill black people in Africa. Right? They don't want to live in a world where everyone regards them for what they are, which is a psychopathic group of rapists and murderers. Like, they don't want the world to see them that way. But it's coming. And when it comes, then you'll see the jackboot. Then you'll see the brick wall in the back of the theater. The song and dance will stop happening. And all of our media will basically become fascist propaganda. Right? It's already almost there. Like, all of this Marvel stuff is basically just proto-fascist propaganda that's right in front of our faces. And we're all just supposed to ignore it. And it won't be too much longer until Homelander shows up, murdering people in the streets and acting like a total psychopath, and we're all just supposed to go, there's the hero. What a great guy that guy is. And there'll be a lot of people who do. Libertarians mainly, I expect. Ben says, we're seeing de-dollarization. I don't know how that will affect us. Probably not well. We'll continue trading in USD because all parties have a hate boner for China. Like, here's the thing, Ben. Find any object in your house. Pick up anything that's around you right now. Here, I got this. I got this right here. I got a little object right here. Right? And where is this made? It's gonna have a made in, right? The bottle is gonna be made somewhere, right? Made in. Well, I can't find it. It's fine. But it'll probably say made in China, right? It'll probably say made in China, made in Vietnam, made in somewhere in the Philippines, somewhere in Southeast Asia, right? Well, what are we giving them for that? What are we giving them to get that? Right? So they're making an asset. They're making an item, something real and tangible that exists in the world, something you can use, something you can consume, right? Well, what are we giving them for that? We're giving them dollars. We're giving them little pieces of paper that we printed, or zeros and ones on a screen that we just punch in, right? And the value of all of that is going to decline. And it's going to decline because the entire rest of the world is starting to trade stuff amongst itself, and it's no longer going to begin trading dollars. So the value of the dollar is going to drop significantly, and what that means is that you are not going to be able to get goods anymore. That all of those goods that say made in China, they're not coming. They're not going to show up anymore. You're not going to be able to get your cheap snackies anymore. It is a decline in the living standards of the American populace in a big and significant way, and Americans are not ready for it. They are not at all ready for it at all. And the system of capital is not ready to deal with it. Because we've come to a point now where the only thing that the system of capital is offering anyone anymore is just little snackies. That's it. This is all capitalism has left for us. Like, if you're a millennial or a Gen Z, right, living in this capitalist dystopia, you understand that really all that you've got is just little snackies. Maybe you could take like a little trip or something, right? The system of capital is not promising you anything anymore. It is abandoning you completely. And even those treats are going to stop coming. Even those treats are going to stop coming. Because the system of capital is without credibility entirely and has failed completely. And so, like, we are heading for a major, major decline. And no one is preparing for it because ultimately the people who are in power, right, they don't give a shit at all. It doesn't matter to them at all. They'll just happily slip into a serf-style culture. That they'll just happily slip into like, oh, I'm the knight of this lord, right? Or I'm a lord that owns, like we call them landlords, right? Landlords. So they're going to very easily slip into this medieval style culture that we're erecting for ourselves. The big difference being that everybody works harder than medieval serfs. We work longer than medieval serfs, and we make less money than medieval serfs. That I saw an article recently that pointed out that we are actually making less money now than they made during the Great Depression. That the average wage at the worst moment of time, or the average earnings during the worst moment of time, was $80,000. Well, now the average earning is $35,000. Like, we are heading for a major decline. Like, and it's going to be fast. It's going to be fast. That what we're experiencing right now is very much like the Roaring '20s, right? There's all the glitz and the glamour, and there's all the, oh, look at all this wealth and all this, so on and so forth, and it's going to hit a brick wall. That right now their strategy is to invisibilize the homeless crisis, invisibilize the fentanyl crisis, invisibilize these things. Well, eventually, we're going to hit a brick wall where you're not going to be able to invisibilize it anymore. Where the homeless are going to be to such a degree that the homeless will outnumber the police. You're not going to be able to contain this culturally. Adam says, according to the Memorial NGO, a Russian NGO, about 720,000 death sentences were passed in the Soviet Union in the 1930s, the height of the Stalinist purges. The group says there are 330,000. I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, you're dealing with a revolutionary government that was dealing with, like, a lot of insurrectionists, a lot of Tsarists, right? Like, the big kind of people say this kind of tongue-in-cheek about Stalin, but like the Stalinists say of Stalin that their big critique was that he didn't kill enough people, that he should have killed more people. Americans being deprived of bread and circuses as a result of dollar collapse has to be the final straw. Yeah, we'll see. Like, we'll see. Like, don't underestimate the kind of degeneracy of the ruling class. Like, the ruling class is very clever when it comes to deception. Like, they're very good at it. And moreover, we're extremely gullible. I think that there are two kind of aspects going on with that. Is that the ruling class, today's ruling class, is very sophisticated when it comes to lying. Like, the CIA is a multi-billion-dollar organization that exists to deceive people. And it's very good at it. It knows how to do it. It's very sophisticated. And moreover, we are also extremely gullible. So those two things together have made a very, what we would consider a complacent population. That people, well, things have got to start improving. Like, it can't just, no, it doesn't. Stop being gullible. Stop believing what the CIA has to say. Stop internalizing capitalism. Stop internalizing this shit. And start actually recognizing that there are people in the society that are actively attempting to destroy you. They're called capitalists. Like, they don't care if you die. They don't care at all. Doesn't matter to them even a little. Yeti says it costs the Federal Reserve 17 cents to make a $100 bill. While countries have to give $100 worth of goods to get a $100 bill. Yeah. But the relationship is going to end. Like, people are just not going to buy the dollar anymore. They're just not going to take it. That China is the place that's making everything. And so people are going to trade with China. And moreover, China doesn't come in and blow them up. Right? That pretty big positive, if you ask me. Who says the Great Depression average wage was $80K in today's terms? Is that because housing and education were so cheap then? I can't tell you the specifics of that, dude. But yeah, the homeless crisis is impossible to ignore. I mean, but most people do, right? Most people do. Most people have erected defense mechanisms for themselves, right? That the individualization of homelessness. Right, the refusal to acknowledge that homelessness is a systemic problem, and instead it's, oh no, it's them, they must have done something wrong, right? Like, and I can just go along my merry life and that's fine. And most people do ignore the homeless crisis. Yeah, who says, I'm good with purges of actual political actors, yeah. I don't think we should ever be condoning or trivializing state-sanctioned murder. I mean, I think it's fine to kill Nazis. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. Like, I think it's completely fine for a state to kill Nazis. This is a lighter. Like, I understand why people say that they are against, like, the death penalty and why they're against this kind of stuff. Those people have never experienced or are not interested in the truth behind what Nazis are. Like, they're just not. These are crazed serial killers who are actively attempting to purge the society of minority groups. Like, I don't understand why we should ever tolerate that. Like, ever. Under any circumstances. Especially if they organize. Like, this childish idea that says, well, you want to kill Nazis, you're the real Nazi, get out of here with that. That's baby talk. Like, Nazism is serious. The people who fall for this death cult ideology are serious. And the only way that you can deal with a people who have committed themselves to a death cult in this way is through force of arms. It's the only thing they care about, and it's the only language they speak. And that's just the hard truth. You're not going to re-educate these people. It's not going to happen. If you're in an urban area, it's impossible to ignore the increase in homelessness that has happened. I mean, yeah, but everybody does. Like, everybody does. Like, nobody's voting on this line of homelessness. Nobody cares. Like, everything's just about my own personal wealth. You could only address homelessness with mandatory drug treatment. I mean, I would argue that the first step in addressing homelessness is to provide housing. Like, I see where you're coming from with the drug treatment aspect, and I think that is a serious conversation that needs to be happening. But if you don't actually address the homelessness, you don't actually address the fact that they don't have a home, then you're never going to get anywhere with drug treatment. It's never going to go anywhere. Like, they're not going to be... that guy says there is no situation where we should condone the state having the power to take the lives of its populace. So if a Nazi group starts murdering Muslims in the city of Toronto, the state should not respond. Correct? Mr. Moon saw a recent news program about a town here in Australia wanting to limit Airbnb. Issue was framed not in terms of the obvious homelessness, but in terms of the lack of workers to serve the tourists. Yeah, of course. No, it's not. It's not a straw man at all. That's a serious thing that actually happened. That's a serious thing that actually happened. Like, what do you think we're talking about, bro? Like, what do you think I'm talking about? Like, we should purge the society of these types of people. We should absolutely do that. 100%. So homelessness only became a problem when the boomers can get their lattes. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I am saying that there is a time when it is acceptable for the state to use violence against a section of its populace, such as when sections of that society have gone Nazi. Like, I do not hold on to this idea of the pure sanctity that oh, well, the state, if the state starts using violence, then okay, so we're free to have Nazis then, are we? And of course it's difficult. Like, of course it's difficult. And of course you need to be careful. And of course all of these things are true. But I'm so sick and tired of us living in this... Imprison them. No. A bullet costs 50 cents. Like, if you're going to commit to being a Nazi, like, you're basically just saying to me... okay, rabid dogs We don't euthanize rabid dogs. We'll just put them in a cage somewhere. No. Not interested. I'm not interested in spending the resources. I'm not interested in spending the time. I'm not interested in spending on building the buildings. I'm not interested in any of that. Yeah, I hope Nazis think that it's dangerous. I hope Nazis think that what I'm saying is dangerous. I hope that Nazis are afraid of me. I hope that Nazis hate me. I hope that Nazis think that they should be scared. Yeah, fantastic. They're saying that about communists anyway, bud. Like, what are you not putting together here, bud? They're saying that about communists anyway. Like, I don't understand why you're taking this moral purity high road when these guys are going to kick in your door. Yeah, well, who is the state? Who's the state? Who's the state? Like, this nonsense. The state is us. The state is us. We are the state. Like, the state is this. It isn't this monster. It's not this amalgamous nothing that lives off in Mars or something. And it's pretty telling to me. Like, how are we where we're at now? Because of this soft handing. Because this absolute soft handing. Like, if I'm a Nazi living in today's society, I'm just going to be a Nazi. And I'm just going to go around doing whatever, because guess what? The punishment for being a Nazi is fuck all. It's nothing. Like, they'll make me a martyr, I'll go to prison. And what am I going to do? Recruit more Nazis. Like, this society is in a major, massive decline. A major, massive decline. One in which it is not going to recover from. And this soft handing, this glad handing, softness, this weakness that's coming out of the left, this couching of our language, kill Nazis, kill them, kill Nazis. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. We're being ruled by a psychopathic death cult that is using Nazis in order to kick in people's doors and start full-scale wars. Going off to World War III, for God's sakes, where we're worried about nuclear bombardment, and we're sitting here being like, but we gotta be nice to the Nazis. No, we don't. Kill Nazis with guns. Like, I don't know why this is difficult for us. No, I do know why it's difficult, because we want to live in a fantasy world. We want to live in a fantasy world where everything is nice and everybody can be changed and you can change a Nazi's mind. No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't change a Nazi's mind. It's a Nazi is a Nazi. And if we keep with this softness, with this weak attitude, then we're going to get absolutely rolled over. We're going to get absolutely rolled over by these people. I'm not sure why we can't distinguish between the people killing Nazis and the state with its limitless resources prosecuting crimes as they see fit. So, right now, if the people kill Nazis, they're the ones that go to jail. Right? Because that's the nature of the state that we live in. Because the state has been co-opted by far-right fascists who are using Nazis in order to spread terror into the society. Ugh. Like this ridiculous idea that has permeated into our society. Good speech beats bad speech. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It never has. Some people deserve to die. Some people deserve to die. And I'm sort of done with this idea that, like, we are morally better for not killing them. I think that's nonsense. I actually think that if you take a person and lock them in a jail cell for 40 years, like, let's be clear, like, and I think I can say that I don't think that guy is being like a Nazi apologist. I don't think that's right. I think this is a tough conversation that's full of a lot of emotion. And I've put forward a lot of emotion myself in this conversation, right? So it's like it is the and it's an ongoing conversation that's been going on for decades and decades and decades. Should the state have the right to kill people, right? I mean, the state does kill people anyway, right? Should the state be able to enact a death penalty, right? That's the conversation. And of course, some people think no, right? I'm more or less of the opinion that if you're going to stand up and say we should purge the society of minority groups, then you don't need to be part of the society. Like, that's more or less my position. And I don't really accept this idea that, we'll take those people who are genocidal maniacs trying to purge the society of minority groups and put them in jail cells so that they can organize with one another. Like, I'm not really on board for that. It's not my position. And I understand that the other side of it is like, it's a slippery slope, right? It's a slippery slope. Because if you allow... So Spenny B. How you doing, Spenny? You know what, man? You're actually saving me from this conversation. I don't really want to have this conversation about the death penalty, about all this kind of stuff. I think we should kill Nazis. I think that's completely fine. So I'm just going to move on for it, and Spenny's saving me from myself. So, Spenny, odds this gig is a Holodomor denier. You are the one making the claim, Spenny, so I would ask you very politely, can you provide a source for this? The thing I always find very funny about people like Spenny, who come in with their confidence, right, that they're very confident that such an event actually occurred, is that they seem completely incapable of providing a source. That it would be extremely easy to provide a source for this. Extraordinarily easy. There would be a book. There would be people writing about it. So no source then, Spenny. No source. Like, that's more or less what I'm seeing. I'm just seeing a guy who's making a CIA claim and isn't interested in sourcing it. Like, if I wanted to source the Holocaust, I could source William Shire's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. That'd be an easy thing to source. You're not sourcing anything, bud. Yeah, fucking tankies. That's right. We're tankies. Tanks are cool. I don't understand why you consider this to be an insult. Like, you're just spouting something that's you heard from the CIA, and you're not sourcing it. So what's your source? Like, what's your source? It'd be so easy to find one. Like, it'd be really easy. Like, that's the most embarrassing part about it. Right? That's the most embarrassing part about it. Is that it would be ridiculously easy to find a source. That there would be somebody from Harvard, somebody from Oxford, somebody from Berkeley, somebody from the University of Virginia. There would be some historian somewhere who had taken upon themselves to write a historical telling of the Holodomor, using sources, using facts, getting it vetted. It would be so easy to find. It would be ridiculously easy to find. And the system of capital itself would be throwing it in your face every single day. You would know the name of the guy that wrote the book. You would know the name of the guy that wrote the book, right? But you can't find a source and you can't provide one because all they've got are shitty articles written by hacks that get disproven by the universities that I'm using. Because the universities that exist still at least believe in academic credibility. they're at least attempting to vet each other. And they're at least attempting to look at what each other say and say, what? Like, one of my favorite ones that happened recently is somebody used Anne Applebaum's The Red Famine. And if you look up The Red Famine on Wikipedia, there's a criticism of it on Wikipedia from the University of Virginia. And the University of Virginia basically said outright, this person's illiterate, she's just making shit up. We shouldn't use this as a credible source. Because guess what? It's a propaganda lie that's started by the Nazis. It got picked up by the CIA because the CIA recruited a bunch of Nazis. And it's perpetuated into the society because there are far-right groups, such as the OUN, who benefit from the idea of it politically. That if you want to show me that the Holodomor happened, like the famine certainly happened, obviously, but if you want to show me that it was an intentional act by the Soviets, then you've got to show me a source. And you don't have one, which is why you're no longer responding. All you've got is fuck tankies. Okay. Peace. Keep worshiping ignorance. Keep remaining ignorant. Maintain that ignorance. Right? It's the third pillar of the decline of Western civilization, is ignorance and worshiping ignorance. And you basically just confirmed to everybody in here that there are ignorant people who are pleased with how ignorant they are. Universities have a leftist bias. Of course they would back communism. I find the entire concept of a Nazi to be quite upsetting. That, like, these people are allowed to persist in the society. It's pretty upsetting. It's pretty upsetting that they're like, and I think the most upsetting thing that has happened in today's society is that somehow a person walking around saying we should eradicate the Jews, we should get rid of minority groups, basically Ku Klux Klan shit, that those people are somehow seen as equally as bad as somebody saying we should eliminate homelessness. That we should eliminate homelessness, we should allow everybody to have access to food and shelter, we should ensure the working class is well taken care of, that they have access to health care, that they have access to education, right? And somehow these two things are considered to be equivalents in this society, this disgraceful society that we live in. My entire chat has devolved into the conversation about whether or not it's okay to kill Nazis. So that's interesting. Let's see what TikTok has to say. Can I send a book written by Steve Bannon? Steve Bannon, eh? Oh, man, you know we're in trouble, man. You know we're in trouble when we're like, I know exactly how I'm going to convince these people. I've got a book written by Steve Bannon. That's going to convince you. Like one of the most prominent grifters of the last decade, Steve Bannon. Here's a work. Steve Bannon was one of the primary advisors to the Trump administration for a period of time, and he pivoted out of that after Donald Trump realized he was a total grifter and got rid of him, and he started going into media, And he's got a whole story, and there's a whole thing. But at the bottom of it all is just this idea that, like, Bannon is like the perfect capitalist. He's a grifter. He's unrepentant. People who fall for his grifts, I'm quite sympathetic for, because he's a very convincing grifter. I mean, he was able to grift the president for a period of time. So, but it's just fun to watch people be like, try to use him as a source. Jonathan, I'm a nationalist socialist. Should I go to prison? See, people use these words. I don't think you know what you mean by that. Like, what does this mean? Like, nationalist socialist. From victory to defeat, China's socialist road and capitalist reversal. Well, that's actually an interesting thing to bring up, because I have an interesting thing here. People have been saying of Xi Jinping, China's not really socialism. Where did that article go? Oh, did I lose it? Oh, that's going to be so disappointing if I lost it. I did. I lost it. That's so sad. I had an article that was basically talking about how Xi Jinping is going after the billionaire class and erecting a... oh, did I? You know what? I know exactly what I did. I put it in the Discord. It wasn't an article. It was just a picture. China's Xi Jinping. Yes. 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 The power. The absolute power. China's Xi Jinping sends warning signal to the wealthy as he opens new front in common prosperity push. President Xi Jinping's report to the 20th Party Congress signaled more robust regulation to narrow the wealth gap. And analysts expect a wider array of taxes to support poor families and bolster the social safety net, while wealthy Chinese could face a rocky road ahead. Yeah. Command Genius, I'm a nationalist socialist. Yikes. Yeah, already, like, okay. What are we talking about? Billionaire class means nothing in the Marxist. I mean, if you want to get really technical about it, sure, bud. But I'm not a purist. Like, I actually really abhor... I used to be a fundamentalist Christian, and so I see fundamentalism everywhere. Like, I see it. And fundamentalism itself is very deadly. And Western Marxists are especially addicted to a purity fetish. That... we, for some reason, feel as though, even though we've never had a successful revolution and we've never had to actually organize on Marxist principles, we seem like we have the right to tell other nations who are actually, yeah, that's purism. You mean actually understanding Marx. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about, bud. That Marx was writing in a theoretical sense. That he was writing a theory, right? And as we see, China's the great example of this. That theory meets reality at some point. And that you have to make concessions. You have to follow a path that makes sense for the reality that you're living in. And you don't need to and if all you're going to do is fall into a theoretical fundamentalism, and treat the works of Marx as if they are a fundamentalist doctrine that needs to be followed, adhered to completely, then you're going to experience a lot of failure. You're going to experience a lot of failure. Like, Marx was just a person, right? He was writing a theory, and his theory is strong. It's a good theory, right? But it needs to be met with a dose of reality. And that's exactly how the Chinese have moved forward. That's exactly how the Chinese have moved forward. Thoughts on institutionalism? I don't know what institutionalism is, dude. Like, that institutions exist? Like, what is institutionalism? Like, what are you even talking about with institutionalism? Like, that we should sacrifice everything to institutions? Yeah, I feel like C.R. Hu and I are of a mind. Yeah, if you have a Nazi in a democracy, you already have a civil war. They only recognize war, not voting or parties other than theirs. Yep. Like that's the thing that I think is not well understood. And I think that a lot of it comes down to just people wish it wasn't so. But it is so. And that's the trouble that people have when it comes to this conversation of Nazism, right? And the people who adhere to it. That that we wish it wasn't so. Well, too bad. It is so. That Nazis espouse a doctrine of violence. That it's not that much different than like an orc being like, we gotta go over there, we gotta kill them and eat their bones, we gotta go over there and those stinky humans, we gotta go in there. It's not much different. Like maybe they'll put on a nice suit and maybe they'll speak with like some kind of like flowery language and they'll say it nicely, but at the end of the day, the doctrine is they're not like us, they should be purged. And there's no such thing as a civil Nazi, right? No matter what they look like or what they sound like, right? That doesn't exist. And the only thing that they'll respond to and the only thing they care about is violence. It's the backbone of their ideology. It's the backbone of the way that they deal with the world. It's the backbone of how they do everything. And they do not respond to debate. They're not going to have their minds changed. They're not going to have their minds changed. That if a Nazi is speaking, it is to recruit or to bully. Those are the only positions that Nazis take. Like, Matt Walsh does not go on to Joe Rogan's podcast in order to try to convince Joe Rogan that he's right. Or to have Joe Rogan try to convince Matt Walsh that he is right. He does so in order to recruit. That's what Matt Walsh is doing. He's recruiting. And if we just watch them do it and say, oh, well, good speech will beat bad speech, like, it's not how it goes. It's not how this works. Sadly. And I wish it wasn't so either. But Corey, you seem really passionate. Communist isn't mainstream. I mean, if you go to China, it certainly is. If you don't want to be part of the greater policy, then go build yourself. Oh, babe. This has been a very passionate one, which is very surprising because I'm actually quite tired and like weirdly zen. Like the Neartic, good to see you, bud. Good to see you. So, let's move on to an article. Chrystia Freeland says Canada will suspend work with Beijing-based bank after allegation of Chinese government control. This is sort of a stupid thing to say, right? Like, China has China is run by the Communist Party of China. Most of the organizations and businesses that are in China are state-run. The idea that we're cutting ties with a Beijing-based bank after allegations of Chinese government, like it's the most like Red Scare hysteria shit I've ever seen. Like, yeah, of course this Beijing-based bank has ties to the Chinese government. It's literally how their society works. So it's like literally how their whole thing functions, right? That what we're doing is we're just fomenting war with China, which is against our better interests. It's completely against our better interests to make enemies of China. It just is absolutely the most daft thing that a people could do. But we're doing it. Yeah, Compton, before the Nazi uprising, there was lots of good German speech, genuinely good, compelling speech. Somehow the Nazis took over anyway. Was the German speech not good enough? Look, the Nazis themselves said it. Like, we've got these Nazis on record. They said that what the people had to do is smash them. That's what they said. That the Nazis were not going to be convinced or stop. And what Nazism always proves, and proves again and again, and it proved it again in Ukraine, is that it doesn't take a lot of violently minded people in order to take over. It doesn't take a lot of them. Because most people are not willing to use violence, right? Most people are not willing to do it. And so if you are willing to do it, you can run the place. That's really the truth of it. Like if you're in a community of 10,000 people and 100 of them are willing to go around with guns and shoot people, then those 100 people are in charge. Like that's the truth of it. And to pretend as though that doesn't happen, and to pretend as though that you could just talk your way out of it, like it just doesn't work that way. That if those 10,000 people actually protected themselves, armed themselves, and smashed those people, they'd be better off for it. I know, buddy. We're having intense conversations. This is an intense conversation about Nazism today. Who knew that we were going to have the most intense conversation today on my day off? No less. I know. Nazis, eh? How strange. How strange that a person would randomly generate into the world, would randomly come into this plane of reality, would randomly show up, and decide to commit to the path of violence. Like it just seems crazy to me that you're looking at the greatness and the glory that is creation and saying, well, that doesn't look like me, so it needs to be removed. Like, it's so weird. It would be like looking at a painting and saying, I don't like the color red, so let's purge the painting of the color red. Just like robbing yourself of something much greater. Oh, Command Genius wants me to check out the article. What is this article? Where'd you put it, bud? In the general? Chinese family of 4 are sentenced to death for killing a landlord. And his whole family after refusing to pay £2,000 of rent. Yeah, it's not very Maoist, is it? What would Mao say? All of them are Chinese nationals, ethnically Korean. Honestly, dude, these sorts of stories are always more complex. Like, I know I've taken a hard position against Nazis, but I don't know if I feel the same way about landlords. Like, I think that we can do away with landlordism, but having just, like, random groups of people murdering their landlords, like, I don't know, bud. You know, it seems... But at the same time, I'm like, fuck landlords. Like, I don't have, like, a hard-on for landlords. I'm not trying to protect landlords. Yeah, Daily Mail. It is as it is. Like, of course the Daily Mail is going to report something like this, right? Like, yeah, there was a landlord who shot dead a couple trying to escape property outside Hamilton a few weeks ago, yeah. Yeah, cut ties with Chrystia Freeland. She's controlled by Banderites. Well, her grandfather was literally a Nazi collaborator. He literally worked in a newspaper. Like, when you actually follow the trail, like the hierarchy that he worked in, he actually worked under Goebbels. Not directly under Goebbels. We're not... Look, Command Genius. We are not siding with landlords. Nor do I consider myself a dangist. Like, I'm just saying, like... randomly shooting a landlord, like, I feel like there's a lot of things that you can do. Like that, I've been reading articles about how there have been tenant strikes, right? The tenants are organizing and doing refusing rent. But at the same time, like, yeah, fuck landlords. Like, we should get rid of landlording. Yeah, I mean, like, Command Genius writes, randomly shooting a landlord is based. It does it does have a certain degree of satisfaction, Command Genius. I'm not gonna fight you on it. Like, I'm not. Like if my landlord suddenly encountered some kind of thing that went badly for him, I would be like, sweet. Like I don't really like, landlording is a parasitical pursuit. It provides no value whatsoever. It inserts a worthless middleman into the process, right? Like, we should get rid of landlording. Like, landlording should not be a job. It shouldn't be something that exists. There shouldn't be no such thing as a landlord, right? That we could erect community-based systems. We could erect co-op tenancies. Like, because we all know how this is. Like, we all know that, like, rent's sky high because landlords want more money, right? And the landlords, of course, will say something like, well, prices have gone up and taxes and all this. But the truth is that they don't work. They don't do anything, right? I mean, climate denialism, yeah, is getting pretty brutal. I feel like my chat and me myself have gotten fairly extremist today. We're in a fairly extremist headspace today, it seems. You can find my Discord. I actually only let people who are donators into the Discord. If you follow the link to the YouTube, my Patreon is in the description. You can donate. That gets you into the Discord. I'm not really interested in letting a bunch of Nazis into my Discord, which so I prefer to vet people. Simple as that. That's cool, but you still owe the last 3 months of rent. Yeah. Like, I mean, the Maoist period was definitely like you're talking about a period of imperial war, like, not imperial war, but like fighting against imperialists, right? Like, the Maoists were militant, like that's the real truth of it. Like, one of the things that I think doesn't enter the conversation too much is it especially is like when you start throwing around terms like Maoists or Dangists or this group or that group. Like, it seems to me like the central tension that existed between the people who would be considered Maoists and the people who would be considered Dangists is that one group still wanted the militancy, and I think the other group was like, okay, we needed the militancy for a period of time. The militancy was something that was necessary for a period of time, but we don't need to do it anymore. So we should be moving away from it. And that, to me, for all of the disagreements and for all the things, but that to me seems to be the central difference. That Mao was a military leader, and he needed to be a military leader. But Deng was not a military leader. Deng was a domestic leader. And I think that's the difference between them. And the cultures that the culture that Mao was putting forward, ultimately, I think the Chinese people no longer wanted. Like, truly, I think that the people of China kind of got exhausted by it, frankly, which makes sense. Like, it people only have so much energy, and people want to live in some kind of semblance of peace, right? People want to enjoy the world that they live in. That it's all well and good to like, I do think that we here in the West do need to get into kind of a more militant place. I think that's true. But I can completely understand Why after fighting a war, right, restructuring your whole economy, going through the Great Leap Forward, like, that would be very difficult. It would be a very difficult period of time. A very, very difficult period of time. And I can really respect and understand why people would eventually get to the point where they're like, okay, like, we no longer live under the thumb of imperialists. We have actually done like a lot of work very quickly on this economy. Like, we've done all of this kind of stuff. Can we take a fucking break? Can I maybe raise a family? Can we get a bit of stability up in here? Like a little bit of calmness, maybe? And I can really see why people would have gone along with that. And that really wasn't how Mao rolled. That wasn't really what Mao was about. You know, that Mao's whole thing was like, we gotta move, we gotta keep going, we gotta keep doing stuff. Like, it wasn't enough to fight a war. That he also needed to do this great leap forward, right? It wasn't enough to do the great leap forward. There also needed to be a cultural revolution. Like, it just always wasn't enough, and which makes sense, right? He's trying to develop the country very quickly, right? But I just think people get exhausted, right? People get exhausted. And it's not like there was like a full-scale revolution or something. It's not like Maoism or Mao has been rejected by the culture. Quite the opposite, I would say. It just seems to me like people kind of got to the point with Mao where they were like, okay, we're looking to move on now. We're looking to do something new and something different, and to think about our relationship to our society and our relationship to our principles in a different sort of a way. And this is why I think Deng ascends, and why Deng becomes the leader of the country. Because I do think that the country was looking like they were happy that they had done what they had done under Mao, certainly. But I think they knew that if they were going to continue down that path, that it would be very difficult. And it would be a very difficult path. So, yeah, I think it's people get tired. And I think more or less that's what happens. That's more or less the story between Mao and Deng. That just people get tired. Yeah, I think the big thing, okay, like, and I'm going to jump in on this conversation that's happening in my chat. There's a conversation going on in my chat right now that is essentially equating climate change denial with Nazism. And I tend to agree with you, CR Strifey, that I don't think that it is right, and I don't think it's right for one reason, which is that Nazis are not deluded. Like, they are deluded, but they're committed to what it is they say. That they know that what they want is to kill people. They know that what they want is to eradicate people. They're not being duped by some higher mind guy who's convincing them of something that leads to the death of people, right? They know that what they want to do is purge the society of minority groups, round people up, put them in camps, systemically eradicate them. They know that's what they want. That's the backbone of the ideology. That's what it's about. And climate change denialism is not like that. That I think that there is a sector of people who know, like, so Exxon executives, for example, or Shell climate executives would be like this, where they know that climate change is real, and they are funding climate change denial movements, right? So if you're that type of person, then yes, I think you're as bad as a Nazi. Funding climate change denial movements and funding when the science is in, when your own people have told you, I think that we can treat those people as bad as Nazis for sure. But for the average citizen, for people who have fallen victim to this, to the climate change stuff, people who have fallen victim to it, it's a different story, right? That people have been bamboozled. That they're not sitting there saying, I want to eradicate human life. they're sitting there saying, this science fiction narrative that I've been hearing from the radical woke left, so it's just so, and these guys are saying that there's no evidence for it, and it's all nonsense, and it's just like that's more or less the position. And so the people that you should be mad at, and the people that you should be saying are as bad as Nazis, are not the people who are duped, right? It's the people who are doing the duping. That's the difference. That, like, Shell executives and ExxonMobil executives and the people who own the fossil fuel industry and who have actively funded climate change denialism, these people are as bad as the Nazis ever were. And worse, if you ask me, because the Nazis weren't also trying to destroy their own children and their own society and their own families. They were doing what they were doing for the glory of Germany, right? Like, they weren't also trying to destroy the entire species. Yeah, boy in a shopping cart, food budget went up $150, yeah. Even the orcas are more radical by attacking yachts. Yeah, I saw that article. Quebec housing minister was asked if the proposed new law will put renters in a tough situation. She said if tenants want to keep their current rights, they should invest in real estate. Like, I don't understand how anybody could hear that and think anything other than that minister should resign. Like, you're not a housing minister then, right? Like, you're not trying to house people. You're not trying to do housing. You're trying to inflate the market on behalf of an ownership class. Maoist China was very calm and stable. Deng's China is basically a 73-year NEP. I don't know what NEP stands for, dude. Like, Command Genius, I don't really get this position, honestly. Like, the development of China is very obvious. Like, it's very obvious to see that China, under the policies that came through with Deng, has been successful. Like, it's obviously been successful. Like, I don't really get your position, I think. That, like, to say that China has not experienced an increase in living standards, an increase in the quality of life for its citizens, a freedom from external forces, like, it just seems to me that for all of the criticisms that tend to come out of people who call themselves Maoist, there's this real, like I feel like what I'm hearing is, like, Mao could have done it better. And it's just kind of like, okay, like, that's nice and all, but, like, you've got to acknowledge the reality of what has happened, right? Like, that I feel like essentially what it's turned into, I feel, yeah, and FDR's USA was also successful in increasing living standards. Yes, that's true. Like, that's true. And so, but what I feel like it's coming down to is it's coming down to a conversation about an imagined reality that doesn't exist versus a reality that does exist that you don't acknowledge. Like, that's the trouble that I have with the conversation as I see it. That the Maoists want to believe in a world that doesn't exist. They have a vision of a world that doesn't exist, and they insist that this world is better. Although I struggle to really see a strong vision there, honestly. And then I say, okay, but, like, living standards have definitely gone up. Like, this obviously worked. China is an ascendant superpower and is likely going to continue ascending. Like, No, I think you're purposefully misunderstanding me there, Command Genius, which is another thing that happens, right? That like what I am saying is that in today's world, like you're saying 1949 to 1976, I'm talking about 2023, today, where we are now, this day, June 15th, now. That the Maoists want to believe that if Mao had have lived forever, that things would have gone into, and that there would be a different world of some kind, which here today in 2023. That I don't think they can really articulate, nor do they really care to articulate. And they do so while also sacrificing the reality of what is actually happening today, which is that China is an ascendant superpower and is beginning to rival the supremacy of the United States, and looks to be actually putting itself in a position where it is going to stably move forward into a new era. No, he didn't. Like, no, he didn't. Come on, dude. Deng could China illegally? No. Come on, man. Like, come on. We gotta keep things rational. Like, we've got to keep the conversation reasonable, okay? Like, Deng did not coup China illegally. Like, come on. China is literally doing neo-imperialism in Africa. It's what it's doing in Africa is called trade. It goes to and people in Africa. I've definitely seen people in Africa talking about this very thing. They're very concerned about it, and they should be. Like, I'm not sitting here saying that China is not capable of this, that they are not capable of going in and creating a new colonial project. Like, that is not what is being said. But is that what is happening? Are we seeing China go in by the force of a gun, round up a bunch of people, put them into camps? Are we seeing them do the same kind of thing that American imperialism has done, right? And if they are, I'd like to see it, right? I'd like to see it, because it seems to me like this whole argument of neo-imperialism in Africa is mainly just an assumption. It's mainly just taking America and showing what America has done in Africa, and then just saying, and the Chinese will do it too. Well, are they? And if they are, can I see it? Because I don't. Like, I don't see it. Like, what I see is I see China going to African nations and saying, hello, you have a lithium mine. We'd like access to that lithium mine. Can we engage in some kind of win-win trade in order to get access to that lithium mine so that we can get lithium into China? And like, if imperialism is talking to nations and doing trade, then the phrase loses its meaning. It's a meaningless. Then everybody is constantly doing that all the time, right? Like, if I go across the room, if I go across the hall to my neighbor and say, hey, can I borrow some sugar, and you can come over and get something from me later, then we're doing imperialism. Like, countries are allowed to trade with one another, and countries are allowed to talk to and negotiate one another and not be imperialist. Like is China invading in mass forces into Mali? Is it going into Zimbabwe and cleansing? Is it coupping a government? Has it ever couped any government anywhere at any time? Has it put up sanctions? Like what is it that China has done that has convinced us that it is acting in an imperialist way? Which is not to say it's not capable of it. So China is collaborating with South Africa. Yes, South Africa is part of the BRICS organization. South Africa has a 7% white population, and 80% of the land is owned by whites compared to like that. Okay, dude, like, literally this argument that you just used could be used for any nation, anywhere, at any time, forever. that I went and talked to that guy. Well, did you know that that guy hit his wife one time? Yeah, I heard about that. And you're going to trade with him? Oh, well, you're collaborating with wife beaters. You can do that all the time. That guy lied one time. You can always do this. And it's easy to do. It's easy to do. Like, and you can always find this argument, always. That because every country is going through something. Yeah, China wants Palestine to be part of the UN. China wants the UN to be part of the UN, which I think is actually the most reasonable solution to what's going on. Like, I mean, it's not just, but it's reasonable. Because, like, what's the solution there? We should just eradicate Israel? Is that the solution? Because, like, I think Israel would have something to say about that. And, like, and I'd like to circle back around on this, and has multiple billionaires. Yep. There is an existence of billionaires, but I have it up on my screen right now. Xi Jinping sends warning signal to the wealthy as he opens a front in common prosperity push. They're doing the thing that Deng said they should. Look, they're doing it. Well, that's a very complex conversation, Command Genius. And the hard truth, like the hard truth to it, is that the only way you're ever going to get a one Palestine solution is if Israel is obliterated. That's the truth. And Israel is a nuclear power, right? It has nuclear weapons, and it's not going to go down quietly, right? And it has strong backing from the it has strong backing from the United States. So this idea that somehow Israel is going to cease to exist and Palestine is going to reign supreme, yeah, right? Like, it's not going to work. It's actually not going to happen, right? Like, the destruction of Israel is not going to work. It's not going to go down that way. Like, it's going to, and moreover, it is outright a call for war, right? A war against a power that has nuclear bombs. So we are asking for nuclear war, essentially, when we're saying that. So it's not something I can take seriously, honestly. Like, it isn't. I can't take this seriously. I think I can understand why somebody would say it, because, like, certainly what's happening in Israel is a crime of the highest order. But China's also part of the IMF. Yeah, China's part of international organizations. Oh, no. Like, I genuinely don't know what it is you're expecting them to do. Like, do you actually expect them to, like, close their borders and just, like, not interact with the rest of the world? Like, that seems to be the argument. And again, I just don't think I could take that very seriously. Like, if you want to interact with the rest of the world, then you need to interact with the institutions that exist. And part of that is interacting with the IMF. Like, if you want to interact with the international systems, then you have to do so. And if you don't, then you're not going to be able to trade. Like, that's what China is all about. China is all about trade. We've been through that with the Philippines situation, dude. Like, China is trying to stop a war. They're trying to not get into war. Yeah, Cuba is the closest we have to actual socialism, which is why China is trying to trade with them. Right? Like, China's solution to lots of things is that we should just trade. That we should just engage in collective trade and win-win trade with one another. That we shouldn't sanction one another. That we shouldn't get involved in each other's politics. That we shouldn't get involved in other people's internal conflicts. That we should acknowledge. Yeah, the USSR never funded anti-communism around the world. Look what happened to them. Like, look what happened to them, bro. Like, Xi Jinping does not want to lose 100 million citizens in a war. Like, I really don't know why that's not sinking in. Like, I understand that it's not pure. Like, I understand that it's a bit dingy. Right? I understand that it's a bit a bit offensive, perhaps even. Right? But China understand, like, somebody pointed out recently, I was listening to an interview, and somebody pointed it out that in the last 1,000 years, China has only been ruled by Chinese people for 350 of those years. Like, China understands very much what it is to be weak and to be ruled by foreign powers. That China wants to rule and govern itself. China wants to avoid a war, a coup. It wants to avoid these things that it has fallen prey to in the past. And if the complaint that is going to come out is that China didn't act in a Marxist pure way to the Philippines, fuck the Philippines. If I'm a Chinese citizen, if I'm a Chinese bureaucrat, if I'm Xi Jinping, fuck the Philippines. Who gives a shit at all about the Philippines? I have 1.4 billion citizens who have experienced because they're avoiding war. Like, I don't know how to get this to you, bud. Like, I don't know how to get this to you, bud. Like, it seems like you just don't want to understand it on purpose. Like, that's what this seems like. It seems like you think that there is no such thing as consequences on the international stage. That China can just do what it likes. That China can just do what it likes. And it can't. And it can't. That while China is in an ascendant position, they still have threats. Significant threats. Major threats that are looming largely in their face right now. And they are seeing the United States, one of the major threats that they face, act against another superpower, Russia. And they're seeing the United States send forth propaganda about Taiwan, a situation that the Chinese hoped had been resolved under Nixon. But now it's come back. And the Chinese are Bud, I'm going to lay it out for you as hard as I can. I don't give a fuck about the Philippines. I don't give a shit. Like, God bless them, all that, okay? But if I'm China, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Even a little. You know what I care about the Philippines for? Is there a United States military base there? Are they going to nuke us? Are they going to send bombs over here? I don't give a shit. At all. And if you're going to stand there and try to pretend as though the actions of China in the Philippines in regards to protecting their own national security somehow defies the project of Marxism, I think you're nuts. I think you're out of your fucking mind that the Philippines is the linchpin. I don't care. I don't care at all. And I think caring about it is lunacy. I think it's nuts. Like, sorry. I'm sorry that there's a psychopathic, crazed, lunatic nation going around the world blowing up people. And that we have to actually respond rationally to this threat that has in the past enslaved our own people. If I'm the Chinese, this is how I'm thinking. And you want me to throw it all out the window, open up an opening for America to come on in there over the Philippines? Like, crazy. CC, you Westerners are so whiny. Be grateful you live in a country such as Canada. Yeah. It's going to be sad watching Canada go into a decline. Like, we're squandering everything we created. Or everything that we got. Like, that to me is the great disgrace of it all. is that we're squandering it all. Because you're quite right. Like, Canada has a lot of resources. Canada has a lot of benefits. There's a lot of positives about living in a country such as Canada. But we're squandering it. And we're going to lose it all. We're going to lose it all. Yep, Han Chinese were ruled by Manchu, by Mongolians, pretty much by the British. Yep. Like, China knows what it's got. It knows what it's got. It knows that it's got control of its own destiny. It knows that it's got that it is ascendant. It knows that it's creating stability. It knows that it's creating wealth. It knows that it's projecting its power into the future. It knows that it's projecting itself with strength, and it doesn't want to throw it away. It's not going to do that. It needs to protect itself, and it's completely understandable that it would. It's completely understandable, especially with the looming threat of America, like right outside. Like, America's like running ships through the Taiwan Strait right now. Like, America's rattling the saber a lot right now. That you're getting like high-level military officials saying that, yeah, we're going to go to war in the in the Southeast Asian Sea. You've got papers like Thinking Through the Unthinkable, which comes out of the Rand Corporation, which is the Pentagon, which says, here's how we're going to do war with China. Like, these are serious, credible threats. These are serious, credible threats that China takes very seriously. And it just seems kind of baffling to me that this doesn't play. That we're not supposed to acknowledge that China is on red alert. Like, China's in high alert. It understands that it has to be. Like, it just seems to be like a very weird kind of position that seems typical. That we're not supposed to acknowledge the situation that's going on when we criticize the actions of other nations. Like it to me, it's a lot like saying, like, you throw somebody into an ocean and they start panicking, and then you go, well, he seems like a good guy, but he's always panicked. Yeah, because he's drowning in the ocean. Like, it just seems to me like that kind of level of what happens, and it happens all the time. Like, I'm constantly supposed to just ignore that a country is engaged in a war when people say things of them. Like, I'm just supposed to constantly ignore that. It's pretty wild. I mean, Look at Z raises up an excellent point here, right? Be grateful you benefit from imperial plunder. Yeah. Like, so much of what exists in the West exists because we essentially have plundered the rest of the world, right? Like, it's easy to pretend as though the system of capital has been beneficial if you just ignore all the violence, right? It would be like getting plunder from a train robbery and then saying the best economy and the best way to organize an economy is through train robbery, right? Just ignore the violence, just ignore the theft, just ignore the whole thing, right? Like, no, what matters is that I'm comfortable. That's what matters, right? I'm comfortable, therefore this system is good. You know, forget about the death squads we sent, right? Forget about the coup. Forget about the just straight up theft of resources. Like, forget about all of that. None of that matters, right? None of that matters. What matters is that I'm comfortable. That's more or less the position of the West. That capitalism is the greatest system in the world because we're comfortable. And don't pay any attention to, like, the wars that we're fighting are to protect your freedom, right? We're protecting your freedom to be comfortable through these wars of aggression throughout the rest of the world. That's basically the position. right? And these wars of aggression that we're fighting, yeah, like they work for a period of time, and they're going to stop working, right? The rest of the world has gotten tired of them, and they're going to cease working. And to me, one of the biggest declines that's going to happen in America is that less and less people are actually going to support the military. That militarism is becoming something of a pariah. That you look at the pro-military propaganda and the pro-militancy of past generations, and it just doesn't exist in the same way. Like, people know what the military is now, and they're not enlisting. They're not gonna enlist. And so, yeah, I worked really hard for this. Yeah, it's like essentially the defense of Ted Bundy, right? Can you imagine? Like, Ted Bundy stands up in trial and says, "I worked really hard, though." And everybody goes, "Oh, he worked really hard. Yeah, he worked really hard. We got to let him go," right? Ted Bundy worked really hard, you guys. Right? Like, at the Nuremberg trials, Goebbels stands up and says, "But I worked really hard." Oh, he worked really hard. Like, no actual assessment of whether or not that work has any value, or what the nature of that work would be, right? But it's just working hard is a reward in and of itself. That's man. Yeah. America is an island. There's no reason for us to have $1 trillion army budget. Yep. Like, the military-industrial complex, just like Eisenhower warned, has taken over. That both the Republicans and the Democrats work in favor of the military-industrial complex, and the military-industrial complex basically justifies itself through war. Communism has killed millions because it's a failed system. Source, please. Like, this sort of CIA bullshit that I see all the time, right? If it's a failed system, why do we spend trillions of dollars in order to destroy it? Like, if communism just fails, dude, why don't we just let it fail? Why are we constantly going overseas and blowing up communist projects wherever they pop up? That's the question that nobody seems able to answer. Like, why are we funding $1 trillion military force to go throughout the world destroying communists if communism just fails? Right? It's just like the most incoherent shit. Communism fails, so we spend billions of dollars to destroy it. Doesn't make any sense. Back then they blamed communism, now they're blaming capitalism. Like, who's they in that? Like, the ruling class is certainly not blaming capitalism. Collapsed in the 90s? I mean, the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s, but it wasn't an economic collapse. It was a betrayal of the principle of communism. Like, if you actually, like Gorbachev and Yeltsin and these guys, they systematically betrayed it. There was a civil war over it in Russia, in fact. And the decline of living standards in the Soviet Union, or in Russia rather, once the Soviet Union was abandoned, was swift. When neoliberalism came in and capitalism came in, like, I mean, for God's sakes, you have child prostitution increase, literacy rates decline, right? Like, the idea that that communism collapsed in the Soviet Union is a joke. It was abandoned. And it was abandoned on purpose. Ugh. It collapsed because they failed 6 economic reforms. I mean, you mean neoliberal economic reforms, right? Like, literacy has been higher in capitalist countries in almost every case. That's a joke. Like, that's actually a joke, dude. Like, I'd like to see your source for that. Like, every single time communism has come into any country, literacy rates have gone up. And that's true of Hugo Chavez, that's true of Lenin, that's true of Mao, that's true across the board. Literacy rates always go up. And man, where's my source? What, that literacy rates go up? I've got sources right here. Let's see if I've got for the literacy claim. Do I actually have that? Did I actually keep that one? Here's the government satisfaction one. I mean, here's a great article that shows IQ scores in the US have dropped. But the literally cope and seethe commies. I mean, what kills me about this kind of statement is like literally what I am trying to do is warn people about the upcoming collapse. That there is a coming collapse. The dollar is going to collapse. That the system of capital has reached its end point. And like, because of immigration. Yikes. Yikes. Like, imagine believing that hardworking people coming into your country is a bad thing. Like, just yikes. Just yikes. What IQ? Oh, the IQ going down is because of immigration. Yikes. Yeah, dude. The United States is in a major decline. It's in a major decline, and this is the fun kind of stuff. This is the worship of ignorance, right? That like we're just happily, because obviously people who don't come from America are stupider, right? Obviously. Yep. Isaac, we're starving our own people and putting them on the streets so we can fight communism because it doesn't work. There you go, bud. You did it. You did it. The perfect statement. We're starving our own people and putting them on the streets so we can fight communism because it doesn't work. Like, we are worshiping ignorance. We're proud of how ignorant we are. We're proud of our ignorance. And we're proud of the decline that we're in. Right? Oh, wow. We just got a lot of Nazis in the chat, man. It's pretty crazy. No, what's happening here with the housing market, right? This immigration line is a far right grift. It's what Nazis always do. It's what fascists always do. That they blame problems on immigrants in order to deflect away from the ruling class, right? That the ruling class is buying up housing. You've got organizations like BlackRock, you've got organizations like Vanguard that are buying up housing at an incredible rate. And they're removing them from the market. They're keeping them empty. They're not renting them. They're doing so because they're treating them as investment properties, and they see renting them out as a hassle, right? And so they're keeping houses empty. And I mean, just walk down any street and you can see boarded up buildings and boarded up houses. Like, you can see this with your own eyes. And the idea, reasonable person, communism is based on poverty. Like, yikes, 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 yikes. Like, you just are admitting your illiteracy. Like, this is as illiterate a statement as can be made. Like, yeah, BlackRock and Vanguard should be destroyed, for sure. I completely agree with that. It's like the only rulers that are bad are Jewish, the rest are heroes. Yep, exactly, B.S. Thompson. That's exactly what it is. Isn't that funny how that works? Right? Destroy the wealthy class, keep everyone poor except the party in power. More illiteracy. This is just illiteracy, Nolan. Like a shocking level of illiteracy. Straight up F minus, see me after class, okay? Like, and you can see this in China today. Like, the living standards have always gone up. Define literacy, knowing things, like reading books, understanding subjects. Like, you have been taken in by a system of propaganda, and I think that you're illiterate. and that you probably need to just start listening and reading more, because this is a shocking level of illiteracy. Lit, 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 lit. Yeah, literacy is how to read and write, and also comprehend. You have to comprehend what you read. All right, no, Nolan. Good luck out there, bud. You're too stupid to talk to. Okay, like, you're an unintelligent person, and you're proud of how unintelligent you are. Like, you're worshiping unintelligence. You're worshiping stupidity. That's what you're doing, and because what you're doing is just it's what far right Nazis usually do, right? They obfuscate and belligerency. What's the word I'm looking for? Obtuse, being purposefully obtuse. That's what the far right usually does, and it's being proud of your stupidity, right? So we don't need to engage with you because you're being stupid on purpose. We know you're being stupid on purpose, and so good luck being stupid on purpose. Okay. Have you ever organized? Yes, I do organize. Oh, it's Chicago Commie. How you doing, bud? I organize with a group called Socialist Action. You can find them socialistaction.ca. They are Trotskyists, but the truth is that they show up. And that to me matters more than anything else. So, or do you just stream bland middle of the road points? Chicago Commie. This is why you're not growing. Like, these sorts of things are why you're failing on these platforms. Okay, it's not interesting. And frankly, I find your points to be pretty boring, more or less. So, yes, Ligand Disease says, everyone, I'm so deeply sorry for driving down the average IQ. It's okay, Ligand Disease, I apologize. Right? Yeah, don't forget Airbnb, boomer investors. Tell them to look at the hard data instead of believing mainstream media propaganda. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how you can live in a society that obviously tells you overt, crazed lies, but your conclusion is that they're definitely telling you the truth about what's going on in communist countries. They're definitely telling you the truth about what's going on in communist countries, guys. Even, they're telling you lies about how to get into wars. They're telling you lies about how to about all kinds of things. People who tell the truth, they literally like Julian Assange. But they're definitely telling you the truth about the Soviet Union, right? Too invested in socialist media to actually do socialist activity. I mean, again, I organize with Socialist Action. I've done many protest movements, dude. Like, this is weird. It's just weird what you're doing, dude. Like, that I think is the weirdest thing about you, dude. I don't really understand what it is you're doing. Like, you think that you're doing socialist activity? Like, it's very strange what I see you do. Like, I don't really understand. I don't think you understand your position very well. And I don't think you care to understand your position very well. That there's like a moral purity about you, and you don't really have the position to be morally pure. So it's very strange what you do. And that you're coming in here and trying to badger me about it. Like, it's very odd. Equity comrade, if you don't like it, you're off to the gulag. Again with this gulag stuff. Yeah, the word gulag is very scary. The American prison system has 25% of the world's population, but yeah, the gulag, that's the problem. I don't think I'm going to be giving my location, Jamie. Thank you, though. Demand better. Good to see you, bud. I had to specifically look for it to get shown your live. Keep up the good work, Commie. Thank you, bud. I appreciate it. Yeah, we get shadow banned, right? People on the left. I know that Midwestern Marx is going to get banned again. That's going to happen. And he is basically the guy who has become like sort of my litmus test for what's going on in social media. That YouTube seems to more or less permit him to exist, but TikTok has banned him like 7 times. And he keeps showing up, and he keeps growing, and then he gets banned again, and then he, and so, I feel like a similar thing is going to happen to me if I grow to any amount, right? If I come up to any amount at all, If you think going to protest is building a revolutionary movement, you're deluded. That's not what I think. Like, again, dude, like, what's your goal here, bud? Like, what's your goal? Because, like, it just seems like you just like to lash out at other communists. And I don't understand it. I don't understand it at all. Like, what do you think you're achieving here? Like, do you think I'm interested in organizing with you while you're saying this kind of stuff? Do you think I'm interested in bringing you in and like and talking to you and organizing with you while you're saying this kind of thing? You think that's working for you? You think I want you to be an ally? Right? Is this how you talk to people around you? Do you find yourself as an outsider a lot of the time, bud? You wonder why that might be, right? Like the moral purity. You got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of it. Like, we can have our opinions and we can have our disagreements, but the truth is that we don't really know which way things are going to go, and that we're all really just trying our best, and that the way that we think because we have reasons to think that way. And a lot of the times I feel what happens on the left, what happens on the left is that we get caught in theory, that there's been a lot of writing, but that writing is primarily theoretical, and that eventually that theory needs to be put into practice. And so what I see a lot of people say, especially in regards to China, communists and socialists say, is they'll critique China as not being actually Marxist because they're not abiding by some theory that you've adhered to and ascended above reality itself, which China cares about reality and cares what's going on in its borders and outside of its borders. And so if it doesn't, and so it needs to act that way. And that doesn't make them less Marxist, right? Just put a picture of Stalin in the fall of Berlin pic behind you and he will leave. I don't think I'm ever going to hang up a picture of any of these guys. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'll ever hang up like a picture of Stalin or Trotsky or Mao or any of these guys. I feel like I'm just like I respect I respect Trotsky and I respect Stalin and I respect these guys for who they were and who they and their contributions to the entire project, right? And Lenin and Mao and Deng, right? I don't take the moral purity position because I don't think Western Marxists have the right to be morally pure. Like, by what right do we have the We've never successfully organized a revolution. We've never successfully built any kind of communist organization of any sort. We've never succeeded in doing any of that, and yet we feel we have the right to critique the people who are currently doing it. Like, I just don't think that that's a smart way to do things. Like, if you're watching a game of chess being played by Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus Carlsen does something that you think is weird, well, too bad. Like, he's the master. Okay, buddy, you're being real loud. This guy. This guy. This guy. This guy. I did get some pictures of, I went to an exhibit recently of Salvador Dali had done some exhibits of the Dante's Inferno. And he had done some paintings based on Dante's Inferno. And so I got some work from that. It was quite something, actually. Salvador Dali was a real character, man. Like a real interesting artist who, people don't really realize he was alive when Walt Disney was around. And they actually did a collaboration together, which is unfinished, but still pretty interesting stuff. Salvador Dali was a fascist? Was he? Oh, we should look into that. That's an interesting claim. Salvador Dali, a fascist. No kidding. It's real surreal how Salvador Dali was a fascist who hit women. In his lifelong quest for fame and fortune, the surrealist painter, loved by 19-year-old trampled female admirers, and supported the Spanish dictator Francisco Franco. No fucking kidding. Such is the message of Salvador. No kidding. Young Salvador was ruthlessly ambitious from an early age. He writes in his autobiography. Dude, that's crazy. I didn't know that. That's wild. Well, I definitely won't be hanging up those pictures I got. That's real wild to me. That Dali's wickedness. George Orwell argued that Dali's wickedness, whether real or imagined, was the artist's cheap strategy to both become and move beyond Napoleon. Dude, Salvador Dali was a fucking fascist? Man. Growing up is weird, man. Growing up is weird. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this is kind of what I'm talking about when I'm like, more and more I just find out. Every day I find out something new about the society that just shows how fucking degenerate it is. That, like, we're worshiping and putting up on pedestals literal fascists. Like, everybody knows who Salvador Dali is. Everybody knows about the melting clocks. His work is everywhere. And the guy's a fucking fascist. What a fucking world we live in, man. What a fucking world we live in. Ah. Like, dude, like, that really sucks, you know? Like, that really, really sucks. Like, is there any part of our culture that we can keep? Is there any part of our culture that we actually get to keep? Is there any part of our culture that we actually get to hang on to? Is there anything that is coming out of Western culture that we actually get to say, aha, this artist was doing this stuff, and I really liked it, and it gets to persist? Is there anything? And more and more, as days go by, every single day, it's just turning out to be no. Like, it's just turning out to be no. That we need to cleanse this society. That the society does need to be artistically cleansed. That we have been taken over by fascists. We have been taken over by a far right who is actively attempting to destroy us. That's actively attempting to destroy human civilization itself. The chance for organized human life through this catastrophe of climate change. And like, we need to go through like a Dadaist period, it feels like, where we just cleanse this place. Oh man, that really took the wind out of my sails, I gotta tell you. Like, I always sort of knew that Salvador Dali was a rapscallion, that he did questionable things, that he was a problematic sort of a figure, as one expects artists to be. But to also be a fascist, like, come on, bro. Like, come on, man. Like, is there anything redeemable in this culture? Is there anything redeemable in this culture? Is there one thing that we actually get to grab onto and say, this is good, this is fine, we can have this, we can send this into the future, here's something that we were doing in the past that has value? Yeah, I'm just finding out about this right now too, and it's disappointing as hell. That's disappointing. That's disappointing. Yeah, me too, Cotton. Yeah, I'm not happy about it. Because we are, first and foremost, emotional creatures and emotional beings. We're dealing with ourselves. We're dealing with ourselves. Yeah, why can't we have nice things? Well, that's an interesting conversation, right, C.R. Strifey? You can still appreciate the art without delving into the person himself. I don't know if that's true, you know? Like, I don't know how much I believe that. Like, I do think that the artist and it is part of the art, and that knowing this about Salvador Dali really does put a taint. Really does put a taint on his work for me. Like, I just don't know. It just made everything that I say about this society a lot more real for me, you know? This is a degenerate society that is in decline. And it's in a decline that it's not interested in recovering from. That the worship of money and the worship of self and the worship of ignorance is coming to a head. And it's permeated everything. It's permeated everything. That it's becoming unhinged. And that there are no heroes. That there are no victors. There's nobody and nothing here in the West. There's nothing here in the West that can be salvaged. That we are destroying ourselves on purpose. That we're destroying ourselves on purpose. And I grieve for it. And I grieve for it. Because this place could be nice. This place is actually quite nice when you get out of the cities and you walk around in the natural world. But we're choosing to live in an environment and in a world. We're choosing to live in this place of total degeneracy, where we celebrate the worst of us, where we celebrate the worst of us. And seeing it come down brick by brick, I try to be an impassive and impartial viewer. I try to be an impassive and impartial viewer. But it is things like this that hit me hardest. To know that one of our great artists do you think he would have gotten as far as he did if he was a socialist? Do you think he would have gotten as far as he did if he was a communist? That we've created a garden, and the only seeds that we're willing to plant in it are little fascists. And I see it in today's modern society. If you're popular and you're a socialist, then you get pushed out. And you can see that at the highest levels. If you're someone like Bernie Sanders, right, you get pushed out. And Bernie Sanders is the softest socialist ever. And all that's left is this unrelenting, ruthless fascism. And it's so senseless. It's without purpose. It's utterly avoidable. I think that to me is the thing that's the funniest about it all. It's utterly avoidable. We could avoid it. I don't think we want to. I don't think we want to. Like when you see someone who is doing something that is self-destructive, that they could just not do, and they would be better off, but they do it anyway. I think that's where we are as a people. I think we know that we're going into a decline. I think we know that things are about to get very bad. I think we know that we are going to destroy ourselves. And I think we want it. I think we want it. And I wish we wouldn't. And I wish we wouldn't. You know, we would all be better off if we just walked into the parks, walked into the trees, and just sat down and stared at the sky. It is the truth that capitalism will take it all from us at the end of it. I think that a lot of us are not going to realize what that means exactly until it's the end. But the stripping away, it happens moment by moment, hour by hour, concession by concession. And it isn't until you're at the very end that you realize you never really lived as yourself. I agree with you, Compton. Tonight was a grim one. Strangely emotional one. But what matters is we're here. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Triple threat, why don't you come back on Monday, okay? Or Tuesday. Ask that question again. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. The billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.